Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. I actually have a special guest, Sabrina Guler out of Phoenix, Arizona here. So welcome, Sabrina.
Thank you for having me.
And today we're going to talk about, a particular niche that she's specialized in and how she helped build and scale to a multi-million-dollar business. So yeah, we're so glad to have you here. I always love to have these women entrepreneurs, especially younger entrepreneurs, that can contribute and inspire other women to see how they can also potentially grow to their full potential. Okay, so how did you start? Tell me a little bit about it. How did you start actually in the real estate space, and what is your background?
Yeah, so I actually fell into this kind of by accident. I have a background in technology. So I originally started my career in project management. I was working actually for Apple for a couple of years up in Cupertino. I was leading the software and hardware engineering division for AirPods. And during COVID, my parents live in Arizona. So I came down here and I wanted to buy a property just to have for when I came to visit them. And while buying a property here, I furnished it, put it on Airbnb, and it did really well. I stayed here during COVID in Arizona, and I left my apartment in San Francisco, and I started buying properties just on my own. And then Apple at the time had an internal real estate investing group. It was just everyone who works for Apple and wants to invest in real estate. And people started, asking me if I would help them with their own investments, similar to what I was doing on my own. One thing led to another. Many LLCs later, after helping a bunch of people and joint venturing and partnering with them on their own individual investments, I had met my business partner through a friend of a friend. He was actually working at Facebook. Same thing as me. We were both doing our own real estate journeys. And we decided that creating a fund would be not only easier, but better because we get to invest across a portfolio of short-term rentals. Especially at the time, during COVID, the market was a little funky. It was unknown. People weren't sure what market was going to do well. You had Austin, you had Phoenix, you had Tampa. Those were markets that were popular. But the short-term rental, investment as a whole had higher yields than multifamily or storage or anything else. So we were able to experiment all these different cities. I remember when we had first started in October of last year, I think the first 2 weeks we had raised $8 million from friends and family, just people that we worked with, people that had extra cash. And that's how we started the fund. And to this date, we are at 22 million. We've raised that in about 11 months. And we own 61 properties, I think, to this date that are either under contract on Airbnb, currently being worked on, design, remodeling, all that good stuff. So yeah, it's been a journey.
So you focus on short-term rentals and Airbnb, right?
That's all we do. So we own single family homes. That's what our portfolio consists of. And for the most part, we buy 3 to 5 bedroom homes. That's our niche in Airbnb. Obviously, there's many different types of properties that you could find on Airbnb, condos, tiki huts. There's a wide variety, but we focus on single family in 9 to 12 different markets that we're primarily based out of.
Okay, great. So one of the things you said that's very important is can you find your niche, right? Your focus. So for everybody here that wants to grow the business to a certain level, and I interview other women. I interview one that she actually focuses, her niche is 10 plus apartment buildings, 10 plus units, and she has almost 300 rentals now. But the thing is, when you start focusing on something, this is what is actually going to explode and develop. And so, if you want to do a little bit of this or a little of that, you're not going to grow as fast, believe it or not, as if you focus and become the best at one thing. And that's what Sabrina has been doing. So, if you want to share a little bit about, how you develop the business, kind of a high overview of the steps. Like for example, how you find the property, where do you look for these properties, and how you set up the financing and all of that. Kind of a little high overview of the process if somebody wants to build up, in an Airbnb portfolio, especially.
Sure. I think there's a very big difference between doing one property. I think a lot of people, when they get into Airbnb, they're like, oh, we've converted our own home. It's doing well. We rent it on the weekends. But that's very different from owning and scaling 60 of them. I think as you own multiple properties in your real estate career, you realize how many issues you have that are very unique to the property. Pest issues, animal issues. It's very specific to the market that you're in. How we look at properties, we look at them in very different ways. So because I have a tech background, we built a software that we use that underwrites every single home that gets posted on the MLS nationwide. And that software underwrites the homes to what we individually look at based on like our pro forma, which is how we watered down all these markets, because there's so many cities in the US where you could, take a vacation at, and there's so many markets on Airbnb. So right now we really niche down it to around 9 to 10 different markets. That's like where we are kind of honing in, and it's all over the country. We're in Scottsdale, we're in Florida, we're in, Blue Ridge, Georgia. We're a little bit everywhere. So we focused that on our niche. Our funding and our lending were leveraged for most of our properties. We're DSCR. That's how we take out our loans. And then I think, to be honest with you, the hardest part about this particular niche of the business was not throwing money at an investment and hoping and thinking that that's what makes the investment more profitable, like you would in multifamily. Multifamily, you can have a really good OpEx, and you could buy washer dryers and convert kitchens, and you have room to raise rents. And it's the strategy is a lot more simple than Airbnb. Airbnb, you're really in hospitality. You're designing homes for clickbait. I think the average that a user on Airbnb looks at pictures. They look at the 3 first pictures on a listing in 7 seconds, and they make their decision. Whether it's like when you have a long-term rental, they're looking at safety and unit space and functionality. Airbnb is like, what am I doing for that weekend, and how do I make my family happy? Are we in the house? Are we at the beach? How do people entertain with that space? How do people use that space? So I think the hardest part of scaling the business was, how do we design, furnish, especially during like all the supply chain issues we had last year was insane. How do we do all of that in a very short period of time, knowing that the house has to get on the market and start producing money? So, kind of jumping back around, we underwrite our homes using our software. We take out commercial loans and funding. We design, we furnish all of our properties internally. Most of our team flies out. We check out, people boots on the ground to make sure every home is of our quality standard. And then we also internally manage all of our homes.
Wow, it's a good operation, right? So, so you kind of stumbled into it. You said, during COVID, when you purchased a property for yourself, and then you prepared this property to be an Airbnb, and obviously you went from there, right? So what suggestion would you have? What recommendation would you have for somebody that wants to get started with short-term rentals?
A good suggestion I would have is to definitely have extra room in your budget for surprises. I think single family homes are, especially what's on the market now, you have a lot of older homes. Just to make sure that you have CapEx for like air conditionings, blowing out, extra supplies. I think people in Airbnb really use the spaces that you provide them, all the towels, all the sheets, all the games and toys that you have in the home. So it's definitely to be creative and to budget yourself wisely. Okay.
And so what would you say then? I want to share a little bit of the toughest times you had in the business, growing this business. You grew very, very rapidly, right? So you're still growing as we speak. But so what was some of the things that were really harder for you to deal with?
I think the hardest part about this business was scaling and moving as quickly as the money was coming in, especially when you're in the world of remodeling and flipping and construction. You're just so labor dependent. And if someone gets sick, your house will just sit, and you can't fly there and make it go any faster. You're depending on people. So I think finding really good people to build a business was not only the most valuable thing, but it was the hardest thing. And it was the most painful thing in our business, at least from like an expensive point of view.
Right. And and this goes a little more also, I want to talk about this as a mindset thing, right? Because one of the things you said, you had the right connections in getting people with money to start with, but it's also a mindset thing, because I think a lot of people say, there is no money out there, or I need to have the experience, or I need to, they always think that like it's so hard to really come across money for investing, but it's really not, correct? And it's really about a mindset shift. I know when I went into private money myself in syndication over 20 years ago, I didn't know that people actually, I didn't realize, I knew that people had money, but I thought, why would they invest with me, And then I realized, like you said, the money was coming in actually faster than I could keep up with them. So do you want to talk a little bit about your mindset around that? How did you wrap your mind around the fact that the money was there and is there for as many investments as you want to?
Sure. I think I'll kind of tie that back to how money comes in and like how your mindset impacts your business. I think there are three things that I needed to really hone in on as that was happening. And I think one of them is to always be connected to the vision that you have for your business, or for whatever you are syndicating for, whether that's an individual project, whatever type of investment you're working on. I think it's to have a vision and to stick with it. In our case, we had a vision to create this massive short-term rental fund, and we knew that not only did we have to raise money for that, but we also had to operate it at a level of quality to produce the revenue that we were anticipating for those homes. Also, I think vision is important to share that with your investors and to let them know that like you have that as a leader, as a person, as a GP, whatever you are in that transaction. I think it's important to convey that clearly to people. Another thing would be focus. I think, when money's coming in, especially if you're in a new world, like Airbnb is fairly new, at least from an institutional perspective, no one's doing it at scale. There were 1,000 things we could have done. We could have built software. We could have gone in 1,000 markets. We could have tried to please everyone. But I think focusing on what we were really good at was key. And then the last thing is, I think, and I'm sure you could agree, I think owning and running a business and doing something that people haven't done before is emotional. It's an emotional territory. And I think having a lot of logic and understanding why you're doing what you're doing is really important.
Great, thank you. So what would you say that makes your company stand out from all the other ones out there? A lot of people are talking about getting into Airbnb, and there is a lot of talk about that, but what makes you stand out?
I think our homes are really fun. We have a hot pink Barbie house in Scottsdale. We have hot pink cabinets and a lot of novelty things. We have like a bubble gum machine. We're actually going on a CBS TV show just to give a house tour for that home. And I think we're niche because we act like a startup, because we offer a product, right? And we have a strategy, and we're heavily in the operational world, but we're also private equity. So I think, I'm wearing a sweater today, we're not very suit and tie as a company. And I think that makes us fun. I think that we're also really creative. But most of all, our portfolio in every market is the top producing. We have the highest producing revenue homes on the market to date. So we're hoping that we're doing something right.
Yeah, it's interesting you said about that, and I like when I rent an Airbnb, I'm always looking for something that is unique, number one, because I want something different than my own home, right? So the thing is, especially if I travel to different places, if I go to Venice, I like to rent a place. It had all Venetian furniture. It kind of had the ambience, right? Went to Australia. I wanted to rent something that had certain views, on the Sydney, looking at the Opera House. So I'm looking at always Airbnbs that are unique, that are very stand out from all the other ones. I'm not just looking for something that looks like a hotel room. Otherwise, I just go to a hotel. So that's very important what you said, because I think that if I saw, I went to Florida and I saw an Airbnb that's pink with flamingos, I would love to go there because that's Florida, right? So yeah, it's definitely things that stand out that are fun. Like I said, you're looking for the experience and standing something different than what you're used to. So very good. So, if you had to make then recommendations for somebody starting out with Airbnb, what's the biggest recommendation you will make if somebody wants to jump into the space?
I would use all of the tools that are out there to make sure that you are investing in a market that's profitable. So there's a lot of tools out there. There's AirDNA. That's like the largest Airbnb data tool. It's great for understanding how much your home could make on Airbnb. I think it's maybe starting small, like maybe in your backyard. Actually, I think that's a common investing piece of advice that people give. Start where you live, start in your home, start somewhere that feels comfortable. Obviously, that's also profitable. But it's addicting. Airbnb is addicting because it is profitable, it's fun, and each home is like a mini business. Good.
Okay, great. So how can people find out more about you and reach you?
Yeah, sure. You can visit us at techvestor.com. That's probably the easiest way to learn more about what we do. And if you're ever interested, you could book a call with us there.
Okay, great. So is there any podcasts or any other books that you would recommend somebody read about mindset and also how to get into the business? Anything you would like to recommend?
I think one of the best books I've read for starting an Airbnb was Optimize My B&B by Danny Rustine. It's like I think it's like a 6-hour deep dive on getting into Airbnb and how to convert your home into that space. And I think it's a good way to see if you want to get yourself into something like that, because the book goes immediately into how to turn your house into a profitable short-term rental.
Great. Well, thanks for that recommendation. I'm always looking for what people recommend because I like to read myself. So thanks for taking the time to talk about what you do, your business, and now, it's very impressive how quickly you escalate in the last 12 months. And like I said, yes, and also it goes back to also the mindset, right? To focus and also to really kind of channel into one area, and that's how we grow so fast. Thank you for taking the time. And anybody that want to reach out, go to techvestor.com.
Thanks for having me.